Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Seth, one of the co-hosts of Engage Podcast, to bring you today another great episode of Engage Podcast. But before I can get into that, I just have to give my world-famous announcements. If you haven't had a chance yet, go ahead and go over to our YouTube page, and you can see this podcast happening in real time. But if you don't want to, you just want to listen to it, then go ahead and subscribe to wherever you're hearing my voice right now if you haven't already. So if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way, every time we come out with a new episode of Engage Podcast, boom, it's going to be on there on your phone waiting for you. You don't have to look for us. You don't have to search for us. Boom, it's going to be on your phone waiting for you. All right, so our guest today was phenomenal. I mean, so this was our second Zoom meeting of the year, and it was just when I think I say it in the actual podcast interview that I looked at the clock about what I thought was maybe 10, 15 minutes into the podcast, and I actually thought that my clock was wrong because I looked at it and it said it's been 45 minutes, and I was like, there's no way. The conversation was that rich. The conversation was that good. Josh Melton is fantastic. I loved hearing from him. I definitely want to get him back on the podcast as soon as possible to kind of dig deep into a lot of the things that he said. You, my friends, are in for a great episode. So give it up for our friend Josh Melton.
Recording in the studio with Seth Walters. How are you, Seth?
I'm good.
Good. And we're sitting with Josh Melton. Josh, how are you today?
Man, I'm doing great. I'm in a different studio, but still a studio nonetheless. But it's great to be here with you guys.
I like it. So just some facts about Josh. Josh is the owner of the commercial cleaning company for 15 years. You are in Atlanta, Georgia?
I'm in Athens, but yeah, I'm 45 minutes outside of Atlanta.
Okay. And then you have your own podcast, which we're going to talk about, I'm sure. So one of the things is some folks that we have on the show, Seth will know, and sometimes I will know, sometimes we both know them. But today, you're a guy that I brought in, and you and I have history together.
We have some history.
And this is the first time in a year, because today actually marks our 1-year anniversary of the whole Engaged podcast.
Oh, congrats. If I'd have known, I would have brought a cake for me since we're a different studio, but I would have had it, blown out the candle for you and everything.
And we could have watched you eat it.
Yeah, been phenomenal.
So how do we know each other?
Man, I tell you what, I don't know if I lost a bet or what exactly happened, but somehow we got placed on the same hall in a college dormitory. And it was like the smallest hall ever. It's called 1B. There's like about 5 rooms maybe. And I got to know Anthony and his roommate, Steve. They were renowned on campus as being the obsessive, compulsive, clean room folk.
No.
It was, yeah, for those who know Anthony, this is no shocker, no surprise. But yeah, when you're in college and the guys next door keep a room that's like it was designed for surgery, like it's that clean. It's like you go in and they're like, you can't bring your drink in here, you can't bring your trash. And like, there were so many rules for that room, but it created opportunities for us to have phenomenal conversations though. A lot of fun. Anthony and Steve were some of my favorite people to be associated with in college. There's just always fun stories. All you had to do to set Anthony off was just say one small thing bad about Bruce Springsteen, and it was over. He would trash his room, then he'd clean it. You know, it was just crazy stuff. Which, by the way, I love the Jeep commercial for the Super Bowl with Bruce. I shed a tear for you, Anthony, when I watched that.
Yeah. I was looking forward to that moment as well. So
he's bringing us all back together, man. He's uniting the country.
That's the voice of America, Bruce Springsteen. So what's funny is that whole clean room situation. When we walked into college, our freshman year, we had, and people don't understand who are watching this how strict Toccoa Falls was at that time. I don't know if it's still like that, but for example, we have facial hair right now. We could not do that on campus.
Yeah.
We had no TVs in our dorm. We had a common area for a television. We had curfews, no guys, in the girls' dorm, no girls in the guys' dorm. It was very, very strict. You had chapel every day. But admittedly, I needed that. But I tell you all this to say that we had, every Wednesday, we had, what was it, room check or something like that?
Yeah.
So how if you passed, or if your room was decent enough, is they would leave a roll of toilet paper in your room. It was the signal that they checked your room, it's clean. It was the third week of my freshman year where the RA knocks on the door, peeks his head in. It was like a movie. Looks left, looks right, puts a roll of toilet paper down. He leaves. 5 seconds later, he walks backward, opens the door again and goes, is your room always this clean? We said, yeah. No joke, for the next 4 years, the roll of toilet paper would sit outside of the door. The RA didn't even open the door. He just knew that it was going to be phenomenal.
I mean, that is good leadership from him. Why waste that energy opening your door when he knew what was on the other side? I mean, set it down outside and walk by, dude. Yeah. Save your energy for somebody else.
So what are some of your fondest memories of Toccoa Falls?
Man, Anthony, I loved being at TFC. After my first year, anyway, my freshman year, I came in as a 17-year-old, but I didn't love it my first year. But beyond that, I loved it. I thought it was great. I played soccer. That was fun. Great relationships. I'm still friends, still connected with some people. That's actually come with the development of social media, kind of right after we were in college is when it really kind of blew up. Being able to stay connected with people that I went to school with, and see what's going on in their lives and all those things. I loved TFC. I loved my favorite professor was Professor Vena. I loved him. He always would share a Calvin and Hobbes cartoon at the beginning of class. But just overall, man, I don't know if there's any one experience that stands out as being like the best one, Anthony. I mean, I met my wife there. There's things like that. That would probably be the highlight, obviously. But I loved my 4 years at Toccoa. I just enjoyed it. It was a good, I think, seasoning for me to learn some things that would apply later in life. And I got to meet some cool people like Steve.
Should we have Steve on the podcast?
It would be a disservice if you did not have Steve Blues on this podcast at some point. He's one of my favorite people ever. He's just a great guy.
He only hears stories of Steve.
Oh yeah, we talked yesterday about Steve.
Yeah. We had a whole conversation about Steve. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Man, as soon as I got into Toccoa, Anthony, so as soon as I graduated from the college, I stayed in Toccoa because my wife was in the class behind me. And leaving there, I came across Robert Kiyosaki's book, Cash Flow Quadrant, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and read that. And that really, something clicked in me when I read that book. There's this cash flow quadrant thing you can see, look it up sometime. It changed the way I thought about what my career was going to be. I was in a band in college. That was fun. I was a lead singer for a band. We did some worship stuff, and that's what I was, all right, I get this job. I'll stay around with where my wife's, until my wife graduates, but I'm going to do this band thing. And that was really my only ambition. I didn't have a career ambition. I wasn't money motivated, but I read that book and it just changed the way I thought about the trajectory of what I wanted to do for professional sense. Cause I just didn't really know what I wanted to do, but that put this bug into me that I wanted to own my own business. I wanted to be able to call my own shots. I knew from a personality standpoint, having a boss wasn't I had a rebellious streak. I don't like being told what to do. Don't really like telling others what to do either, but I kind of want to do my own thing. So that set me out, man, to start my own businesses. Over the years, I've had really numerous different businesses. Most of them fail. That's just the way it goes. Over 80% of small businesses fail, but we had a couple that, we got them to stick. And so that's kind of the thing now. So I own a commercial cleaning company called Athens Cleaning Company for the last 15 years. Also been in the insurance business, roughly that same amount of time, do some coaching, some speaking. Some emceeing, that's a fun thing. I think I picked that up from my band days of like, being in front of people talking. So I have a lot of fun with that. This past year, my business partner and I launched in the middle of COVID. This was kind of cool, a business conference, like a live business conference. We had Jesse Itzler, our keynote speaker. If you don't know who that is, Google him sometime. It's phenomenal. Yes, that's part of my story, man. As far as who am I, a dad. I think that's one of my favorite roles in life, is being a father. I got a 11-year-old boy, a 9-year-old girl, and a 6-year-old girl, and that's just like the joy of my life. My wife is awesome. She's my best friend. Like, we're just, I got a great life, dude. I can't complain. I'll tell you that specific thing, though. Purpose statement, mission statement. I figured this out over years, but my purpose statement is I exist to tell a story that reignites dreams, awakens souls, and challenges the status quo. That's just everything I do is about that. Like, I just want to help people come alive, man, and really live for something, not just be like, like scared of failing, or just never really putting the effort in and having the average thing. Like, no, you can do something bigger. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. It may be you just might have like an awesome garden in your backyard. That may be your thing. That may be what makes you come alive. Or maybe, you're the best pastor of a church in Pennsylvania. Like, it's whatever it is, for people to put that like story forward of who they can be, of something bigger than just what the world tells us to do.
Josh, why do you think it's important for people to have a mission in life?
I mean, if you don't know what you're living for, then what are you living for? Ultimately, I think that we all have, I'm a believer, I'm a Christian. So I think that God made us to have a relationship with us and for his glory. And so there's a part of just, you have purpose because you're a human being. You have a purpose to God's asked us, like, love others. Like, the way that you love God, right, is you love others. Like, that's to love God, love people. So I think we all have that purpose, but I think that God planted within us uniqueness, and that part of our mission in life, part of what we should want to do in life, is figure out, like, what Rick Warren's question, right? What on earth am I here for? Like, what's the specific thing and value that I can bring to the world that can make the biggest difference? And again, for some of us, some people can't talk out loud. So their thing may not be that they're going to speak on stages, but maybe they're going to work in the animal shelter and love on God's creation. Like, what I'm saying? Like, it's different for all of us, but I think that you got to figure out, that's part of worship, I believe, is figuring out who God made you to be. What are those special, what's that special God-breathed inspiration that's in your soul? How can you find it and bring it out and then live it out and glory to him?
Well, that, and the deepest level of despair, I believe, is feeling useless, having no purpose. And people who have that mindset, where their worldview doesn't give them a purpose, right? This is just you're just nothing but a mixed bag of chemicals that came out of an explosion in the universe. And you have 70, 80 years, hopefully, to just exist on the earth, make the best out of it. Those people tend to be, they might be the life of the party because they're living it up. But those people at the core, if you dig down deep enough, those people are really in utter despair because they don't have a purpose. So it's important to have a mission statement, I believe, just for the sheer fact that it makes life, it helps you get the most out of living. So.
Yeah, if you're winning at what your purpose is, if you have something that's a little bit of a benchmark for it, right? So like, I can ask myself on a consistent basis, hey, who have I spoken to or connected with recently where I feel like our conversation made a difference? I felt like something in that conversation like inspired them, reawakening something in them. I think that when people, again, I say dream, and what I mean is that like a God-inspired like purpose or vision for your life. And so I think that especially as we get older, it's easy for that fire to get quenched, that fire to go out a little bit. And so that's why the reignite part, the words were very important to me. Like, hey, reignite that dream. And in the process of reigniting somebody's dream, like, that's the spark that gives hope, right? Like, it makes you envision something that's bigger in your future. And so when you can do that, I think our souls fall asleep over time. Like, honestly, we just get kind of beat down by the hard parts of life. Anthony, coming up in Christian school, Christian college, for me, like, there was a lot of hard things in life I was not prepared for. Like, I was not equipped for, which meant that people around me did not equip me. Not that they were bad people. I was a little sheltered. And so, you go through life, and again, it beats you up. It can be really easy for that spark to go out. But if you can reignite someone's dream, their soul will wake up a little bit, and that is what will challenge the status quo. The status quo is we sing it in Sunday school, right? Like, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. But we, as we get older, oftentimes let it go out. So if you can have people reawaken that fire within them, they'll challenge their own status quo, because they'll start to compare themselves based on who they know they can be, and not in a way where they're beating themselves up, but in an encouraging way of, I got something to chase. And I think we all need, well, that's not on the wall or behind me anymore, but I got John Eldridge's quote about, like, I can't quote it off the top of my head, but we all need a battle to fight, adventure to live, a beauty to rescue. Like, that's what he says about men. I believe that. I'm like, we got to have, that's the mission statement. You got to have a battle to fight. And what's your battle? Is it to create beauty in art? Is it to stand up and fight against things like sex trafficking and slavery? Like, William Wilberforce, which is a very difficult name to say. You think about him, it's like the dude figured out what he was about, and he lived out that purpose, and now we know his name because of it.
So I got I got a series of follow-up questions. The awakening people's souls. How do you see Jesus doing that in the Gospels? Like, is there any one story or interaction that stands out to you where you're like, this is it?
Man, so I think obviously Jesus told stories, right? And so that's the thing for me is, again, I exist. By the way, that talking about forming a mission statement, I read in a book one time. It's like, your mission statement is the follow-up of your sentence starts with, I exist too, ... And they said, like, choose 2 words. Me being the maverick rebel type personality I am, I was like, nope, I will choose at least 3. So mine was tell a story. But that's what I saw Jesus do, Anthony, is he told stories. People would ask him a question, they try to trap him, and he'd be like, hey, actually, once upon a time. And he would tell us a story about something. And then oftentimes he'd close out a story with a question. And so I think that's where I saw, who's your neighbor? Kind of, let me tell you a story about it. He would tell us a story that oftentimes was about ourselves or about the people he was speaking with. Just ask him a question in regards to it. So I think it's not necessarily always, I don't think that Jesus was always telling people specifically what to do. Obviously he did that too, but he would just make them think about something, give them a hint of truth and leave them to evaluate it.
Yeah. Oh, that's a cool answer. I like that answer. My mind was not thinking in that direction. I was thinking of one, like a specific person that he met, but I'm sure those are true as well, but I just like where you took that.
Well, I love the woman at the well story. I'm gonna give you 2 reasons why I love this story. One reason is because growing up the way I grew up, being sheltered, being like really strict Christianity, she's not the woman at the well, the adulterous woman. So this lady gets thrown at Jesus' feet, and they're like, hey, what are we supposed to do here? And they knew what the rules were. Like the guys who were bringing this lady before Christ knew what was supposed to happen as far as the law went, the rules were. But what did Jesus do? Like, he gave them a question. So he gave them like, hey, well, whichever one of you's got no sin, like, I'll be the first to throw the rock. He kind of put it back in their shoes. But he told the woman, like, hey, where are your accusers? He asked her a question and made her think, and then he could tell her, like, well, hey, go and sin no more. So the cool thing with that story, Anthony, is for years and years and years, if you were to ask me, what's the moral of that story? I would have said, we're not supposed to judge people. Like, we're supposed to make sure we look in the mirror first and not judge other people. And about 5 years ago, this is the funny thing, is like, the reason I viewed that story that way, and that the moral of the story being that, is because I always viewed myself as righteous. I was the one who wasn't the screw up that was being cast before him. And so therefore the moral of the story for me was like, hey, don't judge other people. And about 5 years ago, God just spoke to me and he's like, hey, you're the sinner thrown down before me that I have mercy on. And then I forgive. And then I say, hey, I don't accuse you either. I don't condemn you either. Go and sin no more. And it's just that I love that story in the Bible because for 30 something years, I viewed it one way. And then one day I was like, hey, dude, the whole aspect of Christianity is that admission that, like, I'm the sinner. Like, I'm the one who needs the grace and forgiveness and mercy. Instead of being like, well, I need to not judge others because I got it all together, because I'll promise you, my friends, like, I've proven that I do not have it all together. But that's one story, I think, from Christ that I look and see where he asked questions of someone that then empowered him to be able to give them a challenge.
Yeah, I like it. I want to circle back to, you said you do some coaching.
Yeah.
I want to know what's the top one or two things that you find people need the most of when you're coaching?
That change the narrative. We all have this, we got the things that hang us up. We have the fears that hold us back. I think a lot of it comes from childhood wounds, if you will. Childhood wounds are interesting too. So it doesn't have to be anything that's truly significant, like as far as in like some huge experience. It's just when you're a kid, 4 years old, a small experience could seem huge. You could apply it in a way and alter yourself. So I think that the narrative that people tell themselves is the biggest thing that needs to change. And again, going to my mission statement, I use this to tell a story to someone. The story most often is about them. It's painting a picture of them and who they are and who they can be versus the most often tarnished image of ourselves that we carry along with us. So I think that the number one thing that I see is that people have this. I heard it said the other day this way. I loved it because I've never heard it. You've heard the term inner critic. If anybody's heard about the Enneagram, type 1s have this inner critic that's a lot stronger than most people's. But I heard this lady say the other day, well, you can also have an inner champion. I was like, oh, okay, inner critic, inner champion. As a pastoral ministries major, Anthony, I love that alliteration they have there with the IC on both sides. But the internal critic is what most people listen to. They listen to these stories that hold them back. They listen to I believe it's the accuser that tells them that they don't have what it takes. I mean, all these lies that Satan tells us. I'm like, you got to figure out how to not listen to that guy and then listen to the inner champion. And what's he saying? Like, what's that story that God breathed, like, you may go die, like the image of God inside of you. What story is that part telling, and how can you tune into listening to that? So I think that's the number one thing, Anthony, I see from a coaching perspective is that most people get hung up on some part of their story. And you can have people with tremendous success from a financial level, from a career level, from a fitness level, but there's always things that hold us back based on the stories that we tell ourselves. If we can change the stories we tell ourselves and therefore change our identity, we can get ourselves to take the steps to get to where we want to go.
I heard a story once by Tony Campolo, and he talked about the looking glass self. And he used an example of growing up in Philadelphia. He grew up, Tony Campolo is 100% Italian, but he said he grew up in an all-Jewish neighborhood. And he said on the days before school, and this is funny, this part is funny, he said the difference between an Italian mom and a Jewish mom was clear. As the Jewish kids were leaving their house, you would hear the Jewish moms come out and scream to the kids, hey, do you have your books? When the Italians left their house, you'd hear the Italian moms come out on their porch and scream, do you have your lunch? Which is funny because literally while I was in college, that was the first thing that my mom asked. And I couldn't get past that. What did you eat today? Like, it wasn't a joke. And if she wasn't sufficed, it didn't matter at all of my grades, at all in her mind. It just was I eating? Anyway, he goes on to say that the Jewish parents, he would always say the Jewish moms are the best. And he said he told a story once where one of his best friends got a bad report, and it was like a failing grade. And so they had a parent-teacher conference, and after the teacher told the mom that her son is subpar and is learning his mind, she looked at the teacher and said something on the lines of, well, I see you're not equipped to teach Dr. Smith, because that was her, whatever son's name. I don't remember if it was Smith, but she referred to her son as a doctor. And he said the Jewish parents instill in their kids this idea of greatness from the time they're little. And so he talked about the importance of the looking glass self. How we think about ourselves is determined, especially when we're little, by those closest to us. It's the looking glass self. So when you talk about the inner critic or inner champion, your parents wield so much power because they're the ones instilling that in you. So I think that's powerful. And I'm hoping, again, I say this in almost every podcast, this is not just for us three. I'm hoping someone out there is being inspired right now, by what they will listen to. But I want to circle back because I listened to a video on there, and you have a really cool Facebook account. And you posted something on like 5 things you do every day.
Yeah. And
I asked you about that, and I want you to share that in a second. But you said that was inspired by doing a strengths finder. and finding one of your weaknesses was consistency. So I'm trying to circle back to, when you're coaching others, some of the things that they need, but you needed consistency in your life. Speak to us about the importance of consistency, and then share with us how practically you try to do that every day.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So I took a strengths finder that gives you your 34 talents, which can be developed into strengths. It'll give you 1 through 34. And so I took this. The interesting thing is I took this 10 years ago in March, and I took it this month. So it's been almost completely 10 years separation. And both times, number 34 for me was consistency. Now, it's a little different definition of consistency, but if you talk to anybody who knows me and they're like, hey, how consistent is Josh? I'm like, well, he's a little all over the place, in which I am. And I'm not bashful about it. I'm not shy about it. I don't have a problem with it, to be honest with you. But some people are rigid and they're task oriented. You can go like, this is your checklist, do this every single day. And they can just do it because that's the way they're wired. I'm not one of those people. So consistency, I'll give you an example of something I learned and how I was able to apply it for me that works for me, and how I'm continuing to try to figure out for me how to do the same things that are important over and over and over again. If anybody is struggling with consistency, or they're trying to figure out, like, I want to create good patterns or rhythms or habits in my life, the number one thing I would tell them to do is go read the book Atomic Habits. It's a recent book. It's actually one of the best-selling books this past year, but the book was written several years back. But I have my favorite quote from the book is that you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your system. So you got to be able to build predictability in your life that isn't all about like your force of will, because you get tired sometimes, you get sick sometimes. You got to have some consistency, and the systems will build it in. So one of the things I took from that book, I feel called to communicate. That's part of who I am. I'm supposed to communicate. But I was really struggling to do it on a consistent basis because I didn't have a system. And last year, 2019, I was taking my kids to the school. Now, Anthony, we've been friends forever. You've seen me like post videos on Facebook. Now you see me post lots of stories on Instagram and Facebook. But for a while, I was doing like live videos on Facebook sporadically. I'd do them for a week, and then I wouldn't do them for months. I knew a friend of mine was going through a tough time. And I heard a song on the radio, and I was like, man, this song, I need to send this to her. Like, this is what she's going through. And so I'm typing it up, like I look it up on YouTube. I'm getting ready to send it. And right before I send it, I'm like, I know that she's going through a tough time because I'm aware of her situation. But I bet I have lots of friends who are going through a tough time that this song may speak to them right now. And I had this thought of like, I should make this just a story for everybody, like on Instagram. And I was having this conversation in my head. I'm listening to the radio, dropping my kids off from school. And so I drop my kids off, I park in the parking lot, and I go to send this song, and I have this thought, and then I realize I'm struggling with communicating consistently because I don't have it attached to anything. And James Clear talks about it in Atomic Habits. Like, if you can put a habit, stack it on top of another habit that you already have, that can be the key for you. Well, I take my kids to school every morning. It's just a habit. I don't think about it. It's time to go, we go, right? So, all right, I'm going to start doing a video every time I drop my kids off from school. And so because I had an existing habit that wasn't hard for me to form, it's kind of like an external force that makes me take my kids to school to some degree, I was able to create this habit and be very consistent at it. It took effort to begin with, like, right, I had to think about it, but over time, it became a habit. And so now every single day when I drop my kids off from school, I drive home, before I get out of my car, I do a video inside my car and I post it. I call it drops, because I was like, drop off line of encouragement or something like that was what I came up with originally. And then again, Anthony, you would love this is the pastor thing. I was like, hey, let me acronym this somehow. And for me, drops means daily ritual of pursuing significance. Daily ritual of pursuing significance. So this is my way every single day, ritualistically, of saying, I'm going to put something out there that's important, that can make a difference in the lives of others. So that's for me a way that I was able to find some consistency as an inconsistent person, is finding something I felt like I was supposed to do and attaching it to something that I was already doing. And it made a huge difference for me to do that. And then I started figuring out, man, this is awesome. Because now I produced hundreds of videos online, and I was hanging myself up before not doing them. I'm like, all right, what else can I do? What else can I stack? And so I'm figuring out, how do I put myself in these little boxes at set times that can bring out the best in me? And so there's things I'm still really bad at. I ran a lot in 2020, but I run all different times of the day. I ran at 12. It was midnight last night. I was running at the gym. Sometimes I run in the middle of the day. I'm like, all right, I got to figure out a way to take this running thing and like stack it to something. But that habit stacking aspect that's being taught in Atomic Habits, I just think is a game changer. And if anybody's looking for like, how can I build some significance in my life in a ritualistic way, they should read that book and start trying to implement some of the things that it teaches.
In fact, I'd like to ask, for our listeners out there, if they have read the book by James Clear, Atomic Habits, leave a comment down below when this is posted, because I'm just interested how many people read it, but also it had a huge impact on. I listen, I agree with you 100%. That is, when people ask me what's the best book I read in the last 5 years, I'm hard pressed to not offer that one up every time.
It's great. It's great because it gives you, like, there's some books that make you think, and then there's some books that give you steps. Like, if you want to do this, do this. So it does both. It makes you think, helps you understand, but it gives you practical steps, practical tips, techniques, tactics, if you will, that can put into place what it teaches.
I'm going to read a verse from the book of Proverbs. It comes from Proverbs 10, verse 5. It says, "He who gathers in the summer is a son who acts wisely, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who acts shamefully." Do you see any connections to your life there with what we're talking about?
100%. I mean, like you're saying, it's the matter of being able to do things whether you feel like doing them or not. Get yourself to do the right things. That I use the YouVersion Bible app, and that's actually part of my Power 5 here that I do, or Rule of 5, is that I wake up and my intent every morning is that when I use my cell phone as my smartphone as my alarm, and the first thing that pops up is the YouVersion verse of the day. But today the verse is Luke 16:10, about if you're faithful in the little things, then you'll be faithful in the bigger things. It's so easy for us in life to like want to make the big impact. Like Anthony, somebody like yourself may have had a vision in life at an earlier age of, I want to speak on stage in front of hundreds or in front of thousands of people, and I want to be able to give a message that impacts them and causes them to change. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a phenomenal vision. But how do you live that out? You start speaking in front of 5 people. Like, you may be giving a sermon to your dog. You got to be faithful, because why should you, like, what if you got that opportunity and you weren't prepared? Like Erwin McManus. You guys probably know who Erwin is. He got an opportunity like that. Like, he was bringing the fire. He had a small church. He was preaching every Sunday, doing his thing. At maybe 200 people in it. And he was at a major event, like thousands of people. And the main speaker, like, got sick, couldn't show up. So like an hour before this event, the director comes and says, "Erwin, he couldn't make it. You're speaking." So he had less than an hour to prepare. But he got a chance to speak in front of thousands of people, which I'm sure probably did something for Erwin's influence and career. But he said that he always gave his best every Sunday. I don't know if he felt like he was going to get that stage opportunity, but he gave his all every time with what he had. The little things, every Sunday, I'm just going to bring the best of me every Sunday. And then one day randomly, he gets a chance to speak in front of thousands. He's ready because he'd been faithful in the little things. He'd been consistent with the daily disciplines, even when he didn't feel like it. Man, you know how it is, Anthony. I mean, as a pastor, you're probably thinking like, man, really, what's the use this Sunday? Like, man, people haven't been really interested. It'd be easy to dial it in. Be like, I'm going to show up. I'm going to take this one off. No. Like, show up every day. Give the effort, and just put in the reps. That's what prepares you for the big time that may come your way, and you want to be ready for it. You want to be prepared. So also the compound effect of doing these things, you get so much better.
I had
this podcast since the first time you did it, right? You've done it 30 something times now. Like, you're probably a lot more comfortable, a lot better at it.
Oh yeah. I had one of the greatest pieces of advice I ever got was from a teacher back in my high school in St. Louis. So shout out to Mr. Meyer at Clayton High. One of the things it was kind of just like something he said to the whole class, but I feel like he was saying it directly to me. Is he said, the worst thing you can do is when you have like a vision in life, whether it be college or a job, whatever, is that you fantasize about the end result, the payoff. And it goes, because if you harp on that too much, then you're going to feel discouraged because the payoff never comes to fruition. You're just always fantasizing about you making it to that big job, whatever. He said, what you need to do is you need to fantasize about that first step. Have that first step be all that you're thinking about, and then once you make it to that first step, then you start fantasizing about and thinking about the second payoff, which is the next step, and you just keep doing that. And then eventually over time, regardless of how long it takes, that's the other thing he said too, is that you won't get impatient by doing that, is over time you'll finally get to that original vision that you had. And but in the long run, you were in a way rewarding yourself from the first step to the 19,000th step. And that's something that I've always thought about. I mean, I probably think of that piece of advice at least maybe twice a month. I hear Mr. Myers' voice in the back of my head saying, don't think about the end result, think about your next step.
Yeah, it's huge. Because again, it's hard for us sometimes to see how our daily activities are going to lead us. There's a disconnect between what I'm doing today and the ripple effect of, how that can grow, the compound effect to lead me to this bigger thing. And so, yeah, if you're looking at this, it's easy to get discouraged for where you're at now, that this is where you're comparing yourself to. But if you can all right, that's cool. What do I need to do to get there? Like today, compounded. How do you stay healthy? Well, you sweat every day. Maybe you drink water every day. You know what I'm saying? It's these small, simple, honestly dull and boring and seemingly insignificant things.
So what
over and over again to prepare you for something great.
What are those 5 elements?
So for me, there's 5 things. Everybody would be different, but for me, I have 5 things, and again, my intent is to do these things every day. The first thing is to consume. So I got 40 ounces of water here. Consume water, because when you sleep, you dehydrate. So you need to replenish your body. Start hydrating immediately first thing in the morning. So I start to drink water first thing, and I also consume God's word. As I mentioned, I got the verse of the day pops up. I try to do a quick devotional every morning with the Bible app. And then I also will consume, again, it's easy to check email. Most people's habit, but they grab their smartphone and look at social media, and it's Russian roulette. What's coming, slot machine, what's going to come my way? So my hope is that every morning I do drink water or consume water, consume God's word, and then consume other positive content, whether it's devotional or whether it's listening to your podcast. I know I'm not going to listen to the Engaged podcast and hear stuff that's going to hurt me. It's no, if I listen to this, it's going to make me start thinking about good things, right? So number 1 is consume. The second thing is to claim. And what I'm claiming is I'm going to claim the truth about God. The original sin, right, is when the truth was mixed with lies and told Satan to Adam and Eve in the garden. It's I'm going to tell them something that's not true. So I'm going to claim the truth about God based on his scripture. But I'm also going to claim the truth about me. What does he say about me? So I'll say things like this. Today I'm going to be the best version of me. Today I'm going to be the best version of me. This is one I've changed recently because I just started kind of meditating on this idea. I'm well, what do I want to teach my kids to be? I want to teach them to be a force for good. And I was if I want to teach my kids to be a force for good, what's the best way for me to do that? I want to be one myself, right? My kids need to see me being a force for good. But in this line for me kind of came, and I was but I can't be a force for good because I'm not good. But in Christ I am. So my claim is today I'm going to be the best version of me. In Christ, I'm a force for good. And claiming that about, again, God, this is the day God has made. I'm going to rejoice and be glad in it. It's just scripture. You're speaking it out loud. This is what Jesus did, right? When he was tempted, he spoke the truth about God's word. He spoke the truth about who he is. So I'm going to do the same things. I'm going to make sure that it lines up with what God's word teaches us. The third thing that I do is I want to create. So think about this. I do those things I just mentioned. I drop my kids to school. I'll come back, and before I get out, I create. And I don't know what I'm going to create. I just know I have 10 minutes to feel all right, Lord, what do you want me to speak this morning? And guys, I'll tell you, it's not 100 million people are listening to my Instagram stories. You know what I'm saying? But the reason I started doing them to begin with as more of a public thing is because I thought if I knew any of my friends were struggling with something and they wanted to talk, I would talk with them. I'm going to drop what I'm doing. Yes, let me help you. And so I said, well, if just one person every day hears something and they get something out of what I say, that's enough. Because I would have a conversation if Anthony called me. So why not just put it out there? So my hope is every morning that I want to say like one person will hear this and get something out of it. But I create that content or through Instagram stories. It's just some type of truth, some type of encouragement. Again, daily drops of encouragement. It's just, I want to encourage you guys this morning. The fourth thing is to connect. This means different things for me. This may be I want to connect with an individual. This may be I'm connecting new ideas, new thoughts. Like I'm an ideation guy. Like I like to dream up stuff. So I'm looking for like, who can I connect with? Who can I connect together? Or what can I connect with from an idea standpoint? This morning, I got a friend. I'm like, you got to write a book. Your story's too powerful. You have to write a book. She's like, I don't know where to start. I'm like, all right. What connection can I make? So I find somebody else. I knew was a journalism major in college. I'm like, wants to get involved with a nonprofit. This other lady who's got the story started a nonprofit. I'm like, okay, let me connect these two. And that's what I did this morning to connect. And then the fifth thing is a challenge. You can't grow taking it easy. You grow in the struggle. Like you go to the gym and work out. What do? You face resistance is what you do. You put weight on your chest. You see if you can push it up. You jump on a treadmill and you turn it on. Like if you don't move your feet, you eat rubber pretty fast. Like it's resistance. And so every day I want to challenge myself with something, which again goes into my mission statement, right? Challenging the status quo. I could just be status quo who I am, or I could again jump on the treadmill and hit the button. And then as it's running, if I start feeling like it's a little too easy, Anthony, it's got a little up arrow. You hit that little up arrow and it gets faster. And so I have a challenge every day. So consume, claim, create, connect, and challenge. That's my Power 5 or Rule of 5 that I go for. I got my kids doing this too, by the way. Power 5, theirs is different, but it's like, hey, they're excited, man. They're like, I finished my Power 5. Fired up to do the same things with consistency and see where it takes them.
That's fantastic.
By the way, I incentivize them with money. If you do this 30 days in a row, I'll give you $100. That's the one we got going right now. They're like,
That's good. That's a good way to build habits. So one of the things I since you've been involved in so many different, entrepreneurial endeavors, one of the things is you do a lot with failure. You get a lot of feedback, I'm sure, over the years. What's been a piece of feedback, a critical piece of feedback that was really difficult for you to hear? Tell us why that was difficult, and then what did you learn about yourself?
I'll give you one. This is more of a personal life thing than a business life, but it was really good advice. It was very difficult to hear, and it was very difficult to live out. But it was honestly probably life-saving, and I don't mean life-saving as in like I was going to take my life, just life-saving, and that I could keep a life I was chasing. I was going through a really difficult time. If I could give anybody advice, this is the advice I would give. Number one, the way I say it is don't let go of the rope. And because I got to a point of life where I mentioned I wasn't prepared, and life just beat me down, and I couldn't fix the situation I was in. And I felt like I'm stuck. And I saw myself, guys, as on like I was propelling on the top of a cliff. And so I'm kind of like leaning back, and I'm holding this rope, and I visually saw myself do this. I could remember where I was at. I saw myself just let go and fall. And it was a moment of giving up hope. So the counsel or advice I would give to anybody is like, don't lose hope. Don't let go of the rope. Like I needed to ask for help, but my religious upbringing didn't position us to ask for help. It was like, you take it to Jesus. And so I was struggling with some things. I needed help. I needed a friend who knew where I was at. And I didn't ask for that. I let go of the rope. I gave up hope. And so as a result of that, so that's the advice I'd give. Hey, if you're struggling out there somewhere, if you feel like you're just clinging to hope and like it's starting to slide through your hands, like stop the podcast, text somebody, call somebody. You can call a professional counselor. I did that eventually. You want to call them at the front end of that, not on the back end of that, by the way. It's more fun to go to the counselor when there's less damage than when there's lots of damage. But stop it right now. I'm just telling you, it can be a life or death thing for you to not let go of the rope. So to hold on to hope. So if you're listening to this right now, like stop it, call, text, do whatever. Find who's the one person you need to talk to. If you don't have them, again, call the pastor, call the counselor, call somebody. Don't let go of the rope. So based on that story, this is advice my counselor gave me. That Josh, you got some things that you're going to battle through. You got some struggles. And as a result of these things, as a result of some of the calamity you've created by not getting help sooner, by letting this wound like turn into something worse, like you're not going to be able to fight every fight right now. You're not going to be able to engage every battle. So you're gonna have to decide which ones are the most important to you. And it is honestly, fellas, it was like kind of a battle for my soul. And I don't mean my eternal soul, my spirit. I mean like the integrity of who you are. He's like, you're gonna have some friends who are gonna be disappointed in you, and they're gonna be mad at you. They're gonna turn their back on you. He's like, and you don't have the energy to fight for that and to fight for yourself. And so you're gonna have to make the decision to realize that you don't have the energy for that. And so you got to choose you. You got to choose your family. You got to choose your future. You can't fix what you broke with your friends. And if they're not willing to be for you right now, there's no middle ground. There's no gray area. If they're not for you, they're against you, and you got to let them roll. And that was 100% true. I'm so glad he told me that, because that's what I lived out. And I had just a text message from a buddy of mine, longtime buddy, and he's kind of ripping me in a spot where I'm just like the most vulnerable rock bottom I've ever been, and he's like upset with me about how it affected him. And I just remember I'm hearing that, my counselor's voice in my head, and responding to a text message with, okay, because I knew I didn't have the energy to fight it. I knew that would be I would be being a poor steward moving forward. So from an advice standpoint, counsel I've received, that was it. That was some of the best counsel I ever received that I was able to implement. And I truly believe it was life-changing to receive it, and then to have the confidence to apply it, because I got it from a reputable source who's like, this is what you need to do. When it happens, you need to do it. I just went on faith that was right. And it was huge. It was hard, man. It was hard, but it was the right advice. And it's the counsel I give to people now. If they're struggling with similar type of things as me, I say, hey man, you got to fight the battles that are the most worth fighting, but you can't get diversified fighting 15 different things. Like, choose one, man. Just, you can get shot in the back a little bit with some of the other ones, but you got to fight for the goodness of what you're truly chasing after, and not worry about the rest of it.
Yeah. So you got to get really clear then on what you really love, I guess. We call it ordered loves. And you need to have clarity on what's at the top of that.
When you're spinning plates in life, and you just keep spinning more, keep taking on more things and getting engaged in more, at some point in time, you can't tell which ones is the fine china and which ones are paper plates. Right? And so it feels like, oh, this one's going to drop. And you're like jumping over here to say this one's a paper plate. Like, it's just hard to tell but when they're spinning. But when you drop them all, like, then you see like, oh, that one's broken, and that one's worth something. This one's not. So it's absolutely like, what's the fine china that you've been given? And sometimes it's easy to get it all priorities out of whack, but how can you stay clear? That's what the purpose and mission statement is so important.
Right.
Hey, is this in line for who I'm supposed to be, who God's called me to be?
Right. That's what I keep thinking is clarity brings power. You think of the sun. The sun is the hottest thing in the universe, and it warms up the whole earth. However, you take a laser and it's focused, and it'll burn a hole right through you. I think clarity allows you to have power. So I love your analogy of the plates. It's really cool, but we want to be mindful of time. I like Seth likes to ask this closing question. I know we didn't get to everything, but we can always do part 2.
Yeah. So last question. This is a big one. Okay.
It's big.
If you could go back 10 years, I'm sorry, you know what? Let me make it even harder. Okay. Because I like this guy a lot. So if you can go back to your 10-year-old self, not just 10 years, but your 10-year-old self. And if you had a chance to sit down with your 10-year-old self and talk to that younger version of yourself, what would you tell yourself? What advice would you give yourself?
It's a great question. Man, as a 10-year-old, so the funny thing is I have an 11-year-old boy right now, right? So I'm kind of living through this, like, what are the things I want him to truly know, and like, what are the seeds I want to plant into his heart, to his soul, that later on, like, that he won't even think about, right? But the things that I'm just hoping that he can bring to life later. So I think the best way I can answer you, Seth, is to tell you when I was 10 years old, I was playing baseball. It's 1991. And this was I'm in Georgia, right? Atlanta Braves went from last place in 1990 to first place. They played the Minnesota Twins in the World Series. It was huge because the Braves had sucked forever, and it was worse the first year. And
I remember that they had those three pitchers, right? That were, who were they? Smoltz.
Yeah. So at the time, this was like the first year they were good. So they had John Smoltz and they had Tom Glavine. I think they didn't have Maddox yet. He came up a year or two later, but they were terrible. And now they're good, and they're going to the World Series. But Terry Pendleton was the third baseman for the Braves, and he won the most valuable player in the National League that year. And so he was the leader. Everybody knew he was the leader, the veteran leadership of the team. And my baseball coach, I played third base in the Little League that year, took me to the side after a game. I can take you to where I was when he said this in Jones County, Georgia. He said, Josh, I want you to be the leader of this team, like Terry Pendleton is the leader of the Braves. Now, Anthony said, I don't know. He could have said that to every kid on the team. But he said it to me, and I'm 40 years old, and I remember it, and I can take you back to the place. He planted a seed of leadership in me. I don't know if it was there before, but he planted it in me, and I can't remember his last name to save my life, but he will forever be Coach Keith to me. Coach Keith. Coach Keith, he loved me, and he poured into me, and he said that was the one thing I remember him saying. But I could always – he was just a great presence in my life. So what would I say to my 10-year-old self? In a lot of my experiences, I probably say that God will always be with you. He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. All of your friends have the potential of forsaking you, just like you have the potential of forsaking all of your friends. But God will never leave. He will always be there. When you're in this moment of your life, if I'm speaking back, right, I'm going back, I can tell him, like, hey, man, when you're here, when you're in New Orleans, and this year, God is right there with you. When you're in this place in Athens, Georgia at 34, God's with you. He's with you, man. He's never going to leave you. You may feel alone. You may feel like everybody's against you, but he's not. He's with you. He's for you. He won't forsake you. I would just try to sink that in, man, I love that song. It's, by the way, Sherrod Henderson had a really funny meme to this, Anthony. Sherrod was my roommate when we were in the hall with Anthony, about the stimulus package. But the song "The Blessing," Perry Jobe and I can't remember Furtick, Stephen Furtick's part of the writing, but that, like, he's for us, man. Like, God is for us. I let my kids hear that song, and I said, and I told them, I was like, guys, like, this is my prayer for you. Like, he is for you. God is for you. Like, he loves us. He'll never leave us. There's nothing you can do to make him go away from you, or to make it where he's not for you. So that's what I tell him, and I make him listen to that song. Sherrod's meme, by the way, Anthony, was who's going to pay for this stimulus package? And it went to that part of the song where it was like, and your children and their children and their children. He like went viral. It blew up, went all over the place. But that's what I tell him, Seth. I'd say he will never leave you, never forsake you. Everybody else might, but he never will.
Well, that is good advice, my friend. A lot of people need to hear that.
Yeah.
So listen, this was fantastic. I actually, about maybe halfway through this, checked my time just to see what time we were at. I thought my clock was wrong because it did not feel like it's been close to an hour, but it has. But that just goes to show how just great this was, at least for myself. I can't speak on behalf of Anthony. Maybe he thought this was horrible. But I really appreciate you coming on here. I definitely want to have you on for part 2. There's just such a wellspring of knowledge and wisdom there that I myself could really benefit from, and I know a lot of people could benefit from. And it's cool to get to know someone who knows Anthony longer than I have known him. So,
well, I'll tell you, Seth, the big thing, man, if I could say anything to you, if I could give you any advice, it's like, dude, you gotta be careful with who you choose to associate with, brother. Like, you gotta choose your friends wisely, man. I'm not saying you're not. I'm just saying choose your friends wisely.
That's why that's why he's sitting next to me.
It's debatable. Lastly, I'll leave you with this. This is just something that I think will truly speak to the hearts of all those who are listening to this podcast now. And that is that Bruce Springsteen is mediocre. If I could get a chance to talk to him, I'm telling a story that would just reignite his dreams, awaken his soul, and challenge that status quo.
Yeah. See, what you can't see in the podcast right now is the smoke coming out of my ears right now.
I'm sure Bruce is listening. Bruce, I was just kidding. Love the Jeep commercial. Amazing.
Listen, if you've been blessed by this podcast, drop a comment below. This has been a great time. Josh, this is Josh Melton from the Entrepreneur Adventure, and we're so glad to connect with you. This is Anthony Cloditis, pastor at Faith, sitting next to Seth here at Engage Studios at Faith Presbyterian Church. We look forward to connecting with you next week. If you haven't already, like and subscribe. Josh, we'll follow up with part 2 in the future.
Yeah, sounds good, man. Hey, everybody, like and subscribe. These dudes are the real deal. Anthony, I love you, man. I think you're awesome. Great dude. Seth, you're hanging with a good guy. Yes, like, subscribe, get on this podcast, man. Y'all listen to this thing. It's good stuff.
Take care.
See you, sir.